20 people received those invitations. My college buddies, my work crew, my parents, Nora's sister Clara and her fiancé. Even my neighbor Dave, who once borrowed my lawnmower and never returned it. But hey, desperate times call for including lawn equipment thieves on your guest list. The responses? Crickets. Total radio silence. But I'm an optimist, right? Or maybe just delusional. I figured people were just busy, that they'd show up and surprise me with their presence. It's 2025, I told myself. Nobody RSVPs anymore. That's just what people do. I was basically gaslighting myself into believing I wasn't about to have dinner with a centerpiece. I'd specifically told Nora that morning, "Honey, tonight at 7 Salvatore's. Don't worry about anything. Just bring your beautiful self." She'd been on her phone, scrolling through what I assumed was Pinterest wedding stuff for Clara's upcoming nuptials, and she'd nodded without looking up. Sure, babe. That should have been red flag number 1. But I was too busy being excited about my birthday to notice that my wife had the enthusiasm of someone agreeing to jury duty. By 7:30, the waiter, this guy named Marco who looked like he'd seen some stuff in his serving career, but nothing quite like this, approached my table with the kind of cautious energy you'd use when approaching a wild animal. "Sir," he said, his Italian accent making even my humiliation sound elegant. "Should I, perhaps bring out the appetizers? Or would you like to wait for your guests?" "Let's give them a few more minutes," I said, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't slowly dying inside. "Traffic, you know how it is." Marco nodded, but his eyes told a different story. They said, "My friend, there is no traffic that makes an entire party disappear." But he was professional, I'll give him that. He just refilled my water glass and disappeared back into the kitchen, probably to tell the other staff about the sad guy in booth 7 who was about to eat enough calamari for 12 people by himself. At 8 o'clock, I finally pulled out my phone and started texting. First Nora. "Hey, where are you?" "Nothing." Then my best friend Jake from college. "Dude, you coming?" "Read at 8:03 p.m. No response. Then my mom. "Everything okay?" She replied 40 minutes later with, "Oh, sweetie, your father and I are at a pottery class." "Is that tonight?" A pottery class. My parents chose throwing clay over their only son's birthday. At least now I know where I got my winning personality. The breaking point came when Marco returned with the birthday cake I'd special ordered. A massive chocolate monstrosity with "Happy Birthday" legend written in gold frosting. Because yeah, I'd actually called myself a legend on my own birthday cake. The bakery lady had asked what I wanted it to say, and in a moment of what I thought was charming self-awareness, but was actually just sad, I'd gone with legend. Marco placed it on the table, and this giant balloon I'd requested, also proclaiming my legendary status, bobbed above it like a monument to my social failure. "Sir," Marco said, and I could hear the pity in his voice. "Should I cut the cake, or just you?" The way he said "just you" was so loaded with sympathy that I almost started laughing. Here was this stranger, this professional food bringer, showing me more consideration on my birthday than my actual family. "You know what, Marco?" I said, feeling that manic energy that comes right before you either cry or do something stupid. "Let's wrap this bad boy up. I'm taking this party to go." I handed him my credit card, the one that still had room on it before the Nora wedding expense avalanche of the following week, and tried to smile like this was all part of some elaborate plan. The bill came to $237. For context, that's about $50 per text message ignored. Marco wrapped up the untouched food in enough aluminum foil to roof a small shed, carefully boxed the cake, and even gave me a free tiramisu for the road. "Happy birthday, my friend," he said, shaking my hand. "You are too good for people who don't show up." I drove home in my Honda Civic, because of course a guy eating alone on his birthday drives a Civic, with a cake-riding shotgun and a balloon bumping against the ceiling every time I hit a pothole. My phone stayed silent the entire 15-minute drive. No calls. No texts. No sorry. Got stuck at that pottery class/work emergency/alien abduction that prevented me from acknowledging your existence. When I pulled into my driveway, the only one waiting for me was Toby, our 5-year-old golden retriever. I could see him through the front window, tail wagging, probably the only living being who'd actually been excited about my birthday. I walked in, put the cake on the counter, and Toby looked at me with those big brown eyes that somehow contained more empathy than my entire social circle combined. Even he seemed to be giving me that head tilt that dogs do when they're trying to figure out why they're human is so pathetically sad. I changed into sweatpants, grabbed a fork, and ate birthday cake directly from the box while Toby sat next to me on the couch. No plates, no dignity, just a 35-year-old man and his dog, watching SportsCenter highlights and contemplating what invisible superpower I'd unlocked to become this forgettable. As I finally crawled into bed around midnight, I remember thinking that maybe tomorrow would make sense. Maybe there was a surprise coming. Maybe I'd wake up to a flood of apologetic texts. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't. But what I would wake up to was way more interesting than apologies. I just didn't know it yet. 3 days after my birthday disaster, I'd reached what psychologists probably call acceptance, but what I prefer to call strategic emotional detachment. You know that stage of grief where you stop crying into your cereal and start just existing? Yeah, I was there, living my best numb life. I went to work at Davidson and Associates. I'm an accountant, which is exactly as thrilling as it sounds, and pretended that everything was totally normal. Nobody there knew about my birthday anyway because I'd learned years ago that telling coworkers about your birthday just guilts them into signing a card they don't mean and eating cake they don't want. My cubicle neighbor, Rita, this 50-something woman who'd been with the company since fax machines were considered cutting-edge technology, caught me staring blankly at my computer screen on day 2. "You okay, Leo?" she asked, peering over our shared cubicle wall with her reading glasses dangling from that beaded chain thing that every office lady over 40 seems to own. "You've been looking at that same spreadsheet for 20 minutes. Just contemplating the existential dread of quarterly tax estimates," I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. Numbers don't forget your birthday. Numbers don't stand you up. Numbers are reliable, unlike literally every person I'd invited to Salvatore's. Rita laughed that raspy smoker's laugh of hers. "You need a vacation, honey. You're starting to look like you're doing taxes for the afterlife." She wasn't wrong. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror that morning and legitimately scared myself. I looked like a guy who'd been personally victimized by buttercream frosting. At home, things were weird in that way that only married people understand. Nora had been there physically, sleeping in our bed, using our bathroom, leaving her hair straightener on the counter like a fire hazard waiting to happen. But emotionally, the woman was a ghost. We'd had maybe 3 conversations since my birthday, and they were all about mundane stuff like whether we needed more paper towels or if I'd remember to take the trash out. Not once did she mention the party. Not once did she say, "Hey, sorry I completely bailed on the one day a year that's supposed to be about you." I kept waiting for some grand explanation. Maybe she'd been planning a surprise, and it fell through. Maybe she'd been in a minor car accident that erased her memory but left her physically unharmed. Maybe she'd been abducted by aliens who specifically targeted women who forget their husbands' birthdays. But no explanation came. Just silence and the sound of her scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m. while I pretended to sleep next to her. By day 3, I'd convinced myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe everyone had actually planned some elaborate delayed surprise, and I was just being impatient. "They're probably organizing something for this weekend," I told Toby during our morning walk. He looked at me with those judgmental dog eyes that said, "Dude, you're kidding yourself, and even I know it." I was in the middle of reconciling a client's business expenses, riveting stuff involving a lot of restaurant receipts and questionable business meetings, when my phone buzzed on my desk. It was 9:47 a.m., exactly the time when Nora usually took her first coffee break at the boutique marketing firm where she worked. I figured maybe, finally, she was going to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Maybe she'd text something like, "We need to talk about your birthday," or, "I'm sorry I'm the worst wife in the continental United States." I picked up my phone, swiped to unlock it, and read the message that would fundamentally change the trajectory of my entire marriage. "Hey, I need $15,000 for Clara's wedding dress. It's Vera Wong. Deposit due today." I read it 3 times. Then a 4th time, just to make sure I wasn't having a stroke or experiencing some kind of accountant-induced hallucination brought on by too much Excel exposure. $15,000. For a dress. For her sister. Due today. No, good morning. No, hope you're having a good day. Definitely no, hey, about your birthday. I'm a terrible person and here's why I missed it. Just a straight-up cash request with the casualness of someone asking to borrow a cup of sugar. The audacity was almost impressive. It took real talent to ignore someone's birthday and then hit them up for the price of a used Honda 3 days later. I sat there in my cubicle, staring at my phone like it had just told me the earth was flat and vaccines cause prosperity. Rita popped her head over the wall again. "You look like you just saw your own audit report," she said. "What's wrong?" "My wife just asked me for 15 grand, I said, still processing. "For her sister's wedding dress." Rita's eyebrows shot up so fast I thought they might achieve liftoff. 15,000? For a dress? What's it made of? Unicorn hair and good intentions. Apparently it's Vera Wang, I said, as if that explained everything. To Nora and Clara, dropping designer names was like casting a spell that made ridiculous expenses seem reasonable. "It's Vera Wang," was supposed to make me go, "Oh well, in that case, let me just liquidate my retirement fund." "Let me get this straight," Rita said, fully invested in my drama now. She pulled her rolling chair closer to the cubicle wall. "She didn't show up to your birthday." "Yes, I know about that. Janet from HR told everyone. And now she wants you to drop 15K on her sister's dress?" "Yep, I confirmed. That about sums it up. And the deposit is due today?" Apparently fashion waits for no man. Or budget. Rita let out a low whistle. "Leo, honey, I've been married 3 times. Trust me when I say this is what we call a red flag the size of Texas." Coming from someone who'd been through the divorce rodeo multiple times, this assessment carried weight. I looked back at my phone. The message just sat there, demanding and oblivious. "No, please. No, if you can. Just a statement of need." As if my bank account was a public utility designed specifically to fund Clara's wedding fantasies. For context, Clara was Nora's younger sister by 3 years, and she'd been engaged to her fiancé Brett for approximately 8 months. Brett worked in cryptocurrency, which I was pretty sure meant unemployed but with a Bitcoin wallet, and Clara worked as an influencer, which definitely meant unemployed but with an Instagram account. The wedding, scheduled for 2 months from now, had already cost me more money than I'd spent on my own wedding 8 years ago. I'd funded the engagement party, contributed to the venue deposit, and somehow got roped into paying for the rehearsal dinner because Brett's parents were going through a financial rough patch, which was rich people code for we don't want to spend our own money. And now, the dress. The $15,000 dress. I thought about my birthday party. The $237 bill for food nobody ate. The cake that was still sitting in my freezer because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. The 8 missed calls I'd made that night trying to figure out where everyone was. That night, I would have been thrilled if someone had just sent me a happy birthday text. But asking for 15 grand? That got an immediate response request. My fingers hovered over my phone keyboard. Part of me wanted to type out a long message explaining exactly how insane this request was. I wanted to itemize every expense I'd covered for Clara's wedding so far. I wanted to mention that my birthday had been 3 days ago and I'd celebrated it with a dog and leftovers. I wanted to ask if she'd noticed that I existed at all outside of being a human ATM machine. Instead, I typed, "Sure thing." But here's the thing about being petty, and I was about to get exceptionally petty. Sometimes you have to play the long game. As I hit send on that message, I wasn't thinking about the dress. I wasn't thinking about Vera Wang or Clara or Brett and his imaginary cryptocurrency fortune. I was thinking about that $85 sushi platter from Salvatore's that nobody ate. I was thinking about my mom choosing pottery class over me. I was thinking about Nora lying next to me every night like I was just another piece of furniture. And I was thinking about symbolic gestures. Because if they wanted to treat me like I was invisible, then maybe it was time I started acting like their bank account was invisible too. Rita was still watching me from across the cubicle wall. "What did you say?" she asked. I told her sure thing. I replied, a smile starting to form on my face. It was the kind of smile that probably looked slightly unhinged, the kind of smile that comes right before someone does something they'll either deeply regret or feel absolutely fantastic about. "That's it. Just sure thing?" Rita looked disappointed, probably hoping for more drama. "Yep," I said, that smile getting wider. "I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for." Rita narrowed her eyes at me. "Why do I feel like you're planning something?" "Because I am," I said, turning back to my computer. "I'm planning to give my sister-in-law the most memorable wedding accessory in history." That evening, I sat at my home office desk, which was really just a corner of our guest bedroom that I'd claimed after Nora turned the actual office into her creative space, filled with vision boards and scented candles that smelled like eucalyptus dreams, or some other nonsense. And I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey. Not the good stuff that I saved for special occasions, but the middle-shelf bourbon that tasted like regret and bad decisions. Tonight called for bad decision juice. I opened my laptop, pulled up our bank's website, and stared at the login screen like I was about to perform open-heart surgery on my financial future. My finger hovered over the mouse, and I could hear Toby snoring in the corner, completely oblivious to the fact that his owner was about to commit what I like to call justified financial malice. In the background, I could hear Nora downstairs watching some reality show about rich people buying houses they didn't need. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our joint account, the one we'd opened together when we got married because that's what people in love do, apparently, showed a balance of $43,847.52. That number represented 8 years of my accounting salary, bonuses, tax returns, and careful budgeting. Nora contributed too, sure, but her boutique marketing salary mostly went toward things like self-care Sundays and a truly impressive collection of throw pillows that served no actual purpose. I was the saver. I was the planner. I was the guy who made sure we had an emergency fund while she made sure we had decorative candles for every season. I took a sip of bourbon, felt it burn its way down my throat, and opened a new transfer window. In the to field, I entered Nora's personal account number, the one she kept separate for her personal expenses, which I'd learned over the years meant everything from designer coffee to impulse purchases of succulent plants she'd inevitably kill within 3 weeks. In the amount field, I paused for dramatic effect, even though the only witness was a snoring dog. Then I typed, $1. $1. A single George Washington. For quarters. 10 dimes. The price of a candy bar at the gas station. The amount you'd give to a street performer who was mediocre at best. I stared at that number and felt a surge of satisfaction that probably wasn't entirely healthy, but neither was being treated like an invisible piggy bank, so we were even. But here's where I really committed to the bit. In the memo field, that little space where you're supposed to write boring things like rent or groceries, I typed, buy a veil. Make it symbolic. I read it 3 times, made sure there were no typos because even in petty revenge you need proper grammar, and then I clicked submit transfer. The screen did that little loading circle thing, and for a moment I wondered if I was really going through with this. Then it went through, and I felt like I'd just completed the most satisfying transaction of my entire accounting career. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting started. See, the thing about being an accountant is that you understand money in ways that normal people don't. You understand access, control, and the beautiful complexity of joint versus individual accounts. And you understand that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's systematic. I pulled up our other joint account, the savings account where we'd been putting money for a future house that Nora wanted to buy in the suburbs, even though we already had a perfectly good house. Balance, $28,392.17. I clicked on the account settings, navigated to the management options, and selected Freeze Account. The website asked me if I was sure. Oh, I'm sure, I said out loud to my computer screen. I'm surer than I've been about anything in my entire life. Click. Frozen. Next, the credit card. We had a joint credit card with a $20,000 limit that we used for household expenses. Nora's definition of household expenses included things like spa days and designer handbags, but that was about to become a non-issue. I called the credit card company, because some things you have to do over the phone with an actual human being who sounds bored with your drama, and requested to freeze the account due to potential fraud. Has there been unauthorized activity, sir? The customer service rep asked. His name was Brandon, according to the robotic voice that announced it, and he sounded like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. You could say that, I replied, taking another sip of bourbon. Someone's been making unauthorized purchases on my emotional bank account, and I need to protect my assets. There was a pause. Sir, I meant on the credit card. Oh, right. Yeah, freeze it. I think someone might try to charge $15,000 for a dress, and I'm not about that life. Brandon sounded confused but complied. The card is now frozen, sir. You'll receive a confirmation email. Brandon, you're a hero, I said. Give yourself a raise. I can't do that, sir. Then take an extra cookie from the break room. You've earned it. After I hung up, I moved on to Phase 3 of Operation Financial Independence, Passwords. I changed every single shared password we had. Netflix? Changed to Nora is the worst 2025. Hulu? Changed to Remember My Birthday. Amazon Prime. Changed to One Duel Larvale with random capitals because even my passwords were getting sarcastic. I was having the time of my life, honestly. Every password change felt like a tiny revolution. But the piece de resistance, the crown jewel of my revenge plan, was the smart lock. 6 months ago, Nora had insisted we install a fancy smart lock on our front door because she'd seen it on some home improvement show and decided we needed to be modern. I'd paid the installer $200 to set it up, and now I was about to get my money's worth. I pulled up the smart lock app on my phone, navigated to user management, and stared at Nora's profile. Her access code was still active, still programmed to let her waltz into our house whenever she pleased. I selected her profile and clicked Remove User. The app asked me to confirm. Confirm. I said out loud, probably louder than necessary. Confirm with extreme prejudice. Her access code disappeared from the system. I then changed the master code to something she'd never guess. 0-3-2-5, which was the date of my birthday that she'd so spectacularly forgotten. The irony was so beautiful, I almost cried. Almost. I saved my tears for Sad Dog movies and the series finale of The Office like a normal person. To really complete the technological lockout, I went into our shared Google Calendar, where Nora kept track of her yoga classes and brunch dates, and removed her editing access. She could view it, but she couldn't change it. Then, in a move that might have been overkill but felt absolutely necessary, I created a new calendar event for today's date that just said the day Leo stopped being a doormat, and made it repeat annually. I sat back in my chair, drained the rest of my bourbon, and looked at what I'd accomplished. In the span of about 45 minutes, I'd transferred one symbolic dollar, frozen 2 bank accounts, locked down a credit card, changed a dozen passwords, and turned our house into a fortress that my own wife couldn't access. It was the most productive I'd felt in months. Toby woke up from his nap, stretched, and padded over to me. He put his head on my knee and looked up at me with those big eyes. "You're judging me, aren't you?" I asked him. He licked my hand, which I took as dog language for no judgment here, boss. "You do you." I could still hear Nora downstairs, laughing at something on TV. She had no idea what I'd just done. She had no idea that tomorrow morning, when she tried to buy her overpriced latte with our credit card, it would decline. She had no idea that when she tried to check our savings account, she'd see a big fat, frozen status. And she definitely had no idea that she'd received $1 for her sister's wedding dress. Part of me felt guilty. The part that had taken wedding vows 8 years ago and promised to be supportive and loving through thick and thin. But then I remembered sitting alone in that restaurant booth, watching that balloon bob above an uneaten cake, and the guilt evaporated like morning dew in the Arizona sun. I closed my laptop, turned off the desk lamp, and headed to bed. As I walked past the living room, Nora looked up from her phone. "Coming to bed?" she asked, like we were still living in some normal marriage where people remembered birthdays and didn't treat their spouses like ATMs. "Yep," I said, smiling. "Just finished some important financial planning." She nodded and went back to her phone. I climbed into bed, and for the first time in 3 days, hell, for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. A petty, vindictive baby who'd just changed all the locks, but a baby nonetheless. Even Toby, curled up at the foot of the bed, seemed to sense that something had shifted. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd just won the lottery, except instead of millions of dollars, I'd won something way better: inner peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've finally stood up for yourself, even if that meant being petty enough to require a clinical diagnosis. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window. Birds were chirping outside like this was some Disney movie, and Toby was doing that thing where he stares at you until you wake up and feed him. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day. Then I looked at my phone, and all hell had apparently broken loose while I was dreaming about financial independence. 18 missed calls from Nora. 18. That's not a pocket dial situation. That's not a hey, just checking in situation. That's a full-blown emergency-level communication attempt. The call log looked like a timeline of increasing desperation. 3 calls at 7 a.m., 5 more by 8:30, and then a rapid-fire succession of calls between 9 and 9:15 that suggested someone had discovered their credit card didn't work at Starbucks. There were also 7 text messages, each one progressively more capitalized and featuring more exclamation points than the last. Leo, call me now. Why is the card declined? What did you do? This isn't funny. Call me right now. I'm serious. Leo, answer your phone. I smiled at my phone like it was an old friend sharing good news. The satisfaction I felt was probably unhealthy, but so was eating an entire birthday cake alone, and I'd survived that just fine. But wait, there was more. 4 missed calls from Patricia, Nora's mother, who I lovingly referred to as the bank account inspector because the woman had never met a financial boundary she couldn't trample. Patricia had this special talent for making you feel guilty about not spending money you didn't have on things nobody needed. She'd probably been the one encouraging Clara to go for the Vera Wang dress in the first place. And then, the cherry on top of this chaos Sunday, 2 missed calls from Clara herself. Clara, who under normal circumstances wouldn't call me if I was the last person on earth with a working phone. Clara, who usually communicated with me exclusively through Nora, like I was some kind of medieval servant who wasn't important enough for direct contact. The fact that she'd called me directly meant this had escalated from minor inconvenience to full-scale family emergency. I was scrolling through this beautiful disaster of a notification screen, contemplating whether to make coffee before dealing with the inevitable confrontation when my phone rang again. The caller ID showed First National Bank, and I knew exactly who it was. Mr. Russo, the bank manager who I'd been working with for the past 6 years, and who had witnessed my financial journey from optimistic newlywed to guy who eats spreadsheets for breakfast. Good morning, Mr. Russo. I answered, trying to sound professional despite the fact that I was still in bed wearing boxers with little hamburgers printed on them, a gift from Nora back when she still gave a damn about my existence. Leo, Mr. Russo said, and I could hear that barely contained amusement in his voice that people get when they're trying to be professional but also witnessing the best drama of their week. I'm calling because we have a situation at the branch. A situation? I asked innocently, sitting up in bed. Toby perked up his ears, sensing that something entertaining was about to happen. Your wife and her family are currently in my office, he said, and I could picture the scene perfectly. Nora in her designer athleisure were looking indignant. Patricia clutching her pearls like this was a Victorian melodrama, and Clara probably scrolling through Pinterest boards of wedding dresses she couldn't afford. They're claiming that you've lost your mind and are requesting that we perform a psychiatric evaluation to restore their access to your accounts. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that makes dogs look at you with concern. A psychiatric evaluation? That's creative. I'll give them points for originality. Mr. Russo chuckled. They're quite insistent. Mrs. Hayes, your wife, suggested that you might be having some kind of mental breakdown due to work stress. Her mother mentioned something about early onset dementia, even though you're 35. He paused. They also mentioned something about a $1 transfer for a wedding veil. Ah yes, my masterpiece, I said proudly. I take it they received that. They did, and they're not happy about it. Your sister-in-law appears to be stress-eating the complimentary mints from the reception desk. I heard what sounded like Patricia's voice in the background, demanding and shrill. Mr. Russo covered the phone for a moment, then came back. Your mother-in-law is insisting that no sane person would send $1 when asked for $15,000. Tell her she's absolutely right, I said, getting out of bed and padding toward the kitchen. I needed coffee for this. No sane person would ask for $15,000 for a dress 3 days after forgetting their husband's birthday either. But here we are, living in an insane world. There was a beat of silence. Then Mr. Russo spoke in a lower voice, like he was sharing a secret. Between you and me, Leo, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen people do crazy things with money. But what you did, that's not crazy. That's what we in the business call setting boundaries. Though I can't officially say that while your in-laws are sitting in my office. So what exactly are they asking for? I asked, scooping coffee grounds into the machine. The smell alone was already improving my mood. Full access restored to all accounts, removal of all freezes, and an apology. Your mother-in-law specifically mentioned something about you needing to remember your place in this family. The way he said it made it clear what he thought about that particular demand. My place in this family. I repeated slowly, letting each word sink in. You mean my place is the guy who pays for everything while being treated like furniture? I didn't say that, Mr. Russo replied quickly, but I could hear the smile in his voice. But I'm also not disagreeing with your assessment. I poured myself a cup of coffee, added way too much sugar because today was a celebration, and leaned against the kitchen counter. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Henderson next door watering her garden, completely oblivious to the financial warfare happening in my life. Mr. Russo, I have a question for you as both my bank manager and someone who's witnessed this train wreck of a marriage from a fiscal perspective. I'm listening. If someone treated you like an ATM machine, forgot your birthday, and then asked you for 15 grand 3 days later, what would you do? He didn't even hesitate. I'd tell them the ATM is out of service indefinitely. That's what I thought, I said, grinning. So here's what I want you to tell them. The accounts stay frozen. All of them. If they want to claim I'm mentally unfit, they're welcome to pursue that legally. But something tells me no psychiatrist is going to side with the people who forgot someone's birthday and then immediately asked them for a small fortune. And the credit card? Keep it frozen. Tell them it's climate change. Tell them Mercury is in retrograde. Tell them whatever makes you happy. Mr. Russo actually laughed at that, a real genuine laugh. You know, Leo, I've had this job for over 2 decades, and this is the first time someone's blamed Mercury retrograde for a frozen credit card. I kind of love it. Feel free to use that with other customers, I said. I'm generous like that. What should I tell them about the $1 transfer? He asked. Tell them it's symbolic. Tell them it represents exactly how much consideration they showed for my feelings. Tell them it's modern art and they just don't understand it yet. I took a sip of coffee, savoring both the caffeine and the chaos I'd created. Actually, you know what? Tell them I'm happy to send another $1 if they want to buy matching veils. I'm a generous guy. I could hear muffled arguing in the background, Patricia's voice rising above the others. Mr. Russo covered the phone again, then came back. Your mother-in-law is threatening to report this to the police. For what? Financial self-defense. Please, let her try. I'd love to watch a cop explain that it's not illegal to control your own bank accounts. I finished my coffee and poured another cup. Mr. Russo, keep everything locked down. And thank you for calling me instead of just letting them bully you into giving them access. Leo, he said, his voice sincere now. I've been in banking long enough to recognize when someone's being taken advantage of. Keep those accounts frozen as long as you need to. And for what it's worth, I hope your birthday was at least somewhat enjoyable, even if your family forgot about it. It was memorable, I said. And this morning is turning out pretty great too. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, watching my phone light up with more calls and texts. Each notification was like a little victory, proof that my symbolic dollar had hit its target perfectly. Toby sat next to me, and I gave him a piece of bacon from my breakfast. You know what, buddy? I said to him. Today's going to be a good day. I made it exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes into my workday before Nora showed up at my office like a tornado wearing designer yoga pants. I was in the middle of explaining to a client named Gerald why he couldn't write off his jet ski as a business expense. No, Gerald, taking clients for maritime networking sessions, doesn't count. When Rita's head popped over the cubicle wall with an expression that screamed, incoming missile alert. Leo, she whispered urgently. Your wife just walked past reception, and she looks like she's about to commit a felony. I barely had time to process this information before Nora appeared in the entrance to my cubicle. And let me tell you, the woman was radiating the kind of fury that makes nuclear reactors look stable. Her face was flushed, her perfectly highlighted hair was slightly disheveled, which for Nora was basically the equivalent of showing up naked. And she was gripping her phone so hard I thought the screen might shatter. Gerald, I'm going to have to call you back, I said into my phone, not taking my eyes off my wife. Something just came up that's going to require my immediate attention. Is it about the jet ski? Gerald asked hopefully. No, Gerald, you still can't ride off the jet ski. Goodbye. I hung up and leaned back in my office chair, trying to look casual even though my heart was doing that thing where it beats faster than a hummingbird on espresso. Hey, honey, didn't expect to see you here. Did you want to grab lunch or something? The look she gave me could have curdled milk at 50 paces. Don't you hey honey me, Leo. We need to talk. Now. I glanced around the office. Several of my co-workers had suddenly become very interested in our conversation, pretending to work while their ears were practically growing antennae. Rita wasn't even pretending. She was just straight up watching like this was her favorite reality show. Even Janet from HR had paused her eternal consumption of yogurt to observe the drama. "You want to do this here?" I asked. "At my workplace? Where I have to maintain some semblance of professional dignity." "You want to talk about dignity?" Nora's voice went up an octave, which was never a good sign. "You froze our accounts, Leo. You changed all the passwords. The smart lock won't let me into my own house. Technically, it's our house." I corrected, because apparently I had a death wish. "And technically, they're our accounts, which means I have every right to manage them as I see fit." Her jaw clenched so hard I worried about her dental work. "How dare you embarrass me and my family like this?" I stood up, mostly because sitting down during a confrontation made me feel like I was at a disadvantage, and also because I wanted to be eye level when I delivered what I'd been rehearsing in my head all morning. "Embarrass you? Nora, I sent you money. You just didn't read the fine print. You sent $1. She was practically hissing now, trying to keep her voice down, but failing spectacularly. $1? Yes. I nodded calmly, like we were discussing something completely reasonable, like the weather or the best brand of paper towels. "That's called symbolic contribution. It's very trendy right now. I read about it on the internet." "Symbolic contribution?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Are you kidding me right now? Do I look like I'm kidding?" I asked, gesturing to my face. "This is my serious face. This is the face of a man who's done being treated like a walking wallet." Nora threw her hands up in exasperation, nearly hitting the wall of my cubicle. "This is insane. Clara's wedding is in 2 weeks. "Oh, it's in 2 weeks," I said, feigning surprise. "Wow, that's coming up fast. You know what else came up? My birthday. 3 days ago. Remember that? The party at Salvatore's that literally nobody attended?" She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but she recovered quickly. "We can talk about that later. Right now." "No," I interrupted, feeling 8 years of suppressed frustration bubbling to the surface like a shaken soda can. "We're going to talk about it right now. I sat in that restaurant for 2 hours, Nora. 2 hours. Alone. With a cake that said Happy Birthday, Legend, and a balloon that made me look like the world's saddest party planner. Where were you?" "I forgot, okay?" she snapped. "I had a busy day, and it slipped my mind. I'm sorry. You forgot." I let those words hang in the air for a moment. "You forgot your husband's 35th birthday, but you remembered to ask me for $15,000 for your sister's dress exactly 3 days later. That's some selective memory you've got there." Rita made a noise that sounded suspiciously like she was choking back laughter. Nora shot her a death glare before turning back to me. "This isn't about your birthday." "Of course it's about my birthday," I said, my voice getting louder despite my best efforts to stay calm. "It's about the fact that I've spent 8 years being the responsible one, the one who pays for everything, the one who makes sure we have savings and emergency funds and a future. And what do I get in return? I get forgotten. I get treated like furniture. I get hit up for cash like I'm some kind of mobile banking app. That's not fair," she protested, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "You know what's not fair?" I leaned forward slightly. "Spending $237 on a birthday party that nobody came to. You know what else isn't fair? Being married to someone who can't even send a text saying sorry, can't make it, but can send a text asking for enough money to buy a used car." Nora's eyes were starting to water, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine emotion or strategic tears. She'd always been good at crying on command when it suited her purposes. "You're being cruel," she said quietly. "I'm being honest," I corrected. "There's a difference. And honestly, I'm tired, Nora. I'm tired of being an afterthought. I'm tired of being the guy who everyone forgets about until they need something. I'm tired of being married to someone who values her sister's dress more than her husband's feelings." "Clara is my sister," she said, like that explained everything. "Family helps family." "I agree completely," I said, crossing my arms. "And I've been helping your family for years. I paid for Clara's engagement party. $3,000. I contributed to the venue deposit, $5,000. I'm covering the rehearsal dinner because Brett's parents are apparently broke despite driving a Tesla. Do you know how much I've spent on Clara's wedding so far? That's different. It's $13,000, Nora. $13,000 for a wedding that isn't even mine. And now you want another 15 grand for a dress. I shook my head. The ATM is closed. Permanently. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara slightly. What do you want from me, Leo? You want me to grovel? You want me to say I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry I forgot your birthday. I'm sorry I asked you for money. Is that what you want to hear? What I want, I said slowly, deliberately, is for you to understand that I'm not just a bank account with legs. I'm a person who deserves to be remembered and valued and treated like he matters. You do matter. Then prove it, I challenged. Tell me one thing about my birthday party. Just one. What restaurant was it at? What time was it supposed to start? What did the cake say? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her silence was louder than any answer could have been. That's what I thought, I said, sitting back down in my chair. I suddenly felt exhausted, like I'd run a marathon while carrying a refrigerator. Look, Nora, I'm not trying to hurt you, but I'm also not going to keep lighting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. So what are you saying? She asked, her voice small. You're just going to leave Clara without a dress? You're going to ruin her wedding. I'm saying she can have the dollar I sent her, I replied. She can use it to buy a veil at the dollar store. Or she can get creative. YouTube has thousands of DIY wedding tutorials. It's very empowering, I hear. Nora stared at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat and birds weren't real. You're serious. As a heart attack, I confirmed. As a tax audit. As whatever metaphor you need to understand that I'm done being everyone's personal ATM. Clara is going to be devastated, she said, trying a different tactic. This is her dream wedding, Leo. Her dream. You know what my dream was. I shot back. Having my wife show up to my birthday party. Dreams don't always come true, Nora. That's life. She stood there for another moment, probably trying to figure out if there was any angle she could work, any guilt she could leverage. When she realized I wasn't budging, her expression hardened. Fine, she said coldly. If that's how you want to play this, then fine. But don't think this is over, Leo. Not even close. I'm counting on it not being over, I said. Because we need to have some serious conversations about this marriage. Starting with whether we still have one. Her eyes widened. Are you threatening me with divorce? I'm not threatening anything, I said calmly. I'm just stating facts. We're married, but we're not really together, are we? You forgot my birthday. I forgot to keep enabling your family's spending habits. Seems like we're both forgetting important things. Nora's face went through about 17 different emotions in 5 seconds. Anger, hurt, disbelief, more anger, and finally landing on cold determination. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. When you come to your senses, you're going to realize what a huge mistake you've made. Maybe, I acknowledged. But right now, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. She turned to leave, then paused at the entrance to my cubicle. By the way, she said without turning around, I called a lawyer this morning. Just thought you should know. Good, I replied. Make sure they take payment plans. Because you're not getting another dime from me without a court order. She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily against the office floor as she stormed toward the exit. The second she was out of sight, the entire office erupted in barely suppressed whispers. Rita immediately popped her head over the wall again, her eyes wide with excitement. Leo, she said in an odd voice. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen in this office, and I once watched Ted from accounting tell the CEO that his quarterly projections were optimistic fiction. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath, feeling like I'd just survived a natural disaster. Rita, I think I need a drink. It's 11:30 in the morning. I stand by my statement. The silence that followed the family intervention dinner was honestly kind of shocking. I'd expected World War III, complete with angry phone calls, threatening texts, and maybe even a strongly worded email from Patricia with excessive use of the exclamation point key. But instead, nothing. Radio silence. Complete and total communication blackout. Day 1 after the intervention, I woke up and checked my phone like I was expecting a natural disaster alert. 0 notifications from the in-laws. 0 messages from Nora. Even my group chat with my college buddies, the one where Jake occasionally sent memes at 3 a.m., was dead quiet. It was like I'd entered some kind of alternate dimension where phones existed, but nobody used them to harass me about money. This is weird, right? I asked Toby over breakfast. He was crunching his kibble, completely unbothered by the social ramifications of my actions. Like, suspiciously weird. The calm before the storm kind of weird. He looked at me with those patient dog eyes that said, "Dude, you're overthinking this. Just enjoy the peace." So I did. I went to work, came home, made dinner for one, and discovered something absolutely revolutionary. Life without constant drama was actually pretty damn peaceful. That first week, I cooked actual meals instead of eating takeout while standing over the sink like some kind of depressed bachelor from a rom-com. I made stir-fry on Tuesday, attempted pasta carbonara on Wednesday. It was mediocre but edible, and on Thursday, I went full domestic god and roasted a whole chicken. A whole chicken. For myself. And it was delicious. I started watching TV shows I actually wanted to watch instead of whatever home renovation program Nora insisted on streaming. I binged an entire sci-fi series about space pirates that she would have hated because it's too nerdy, and why are they always in space? Because they're space pirates, Nora. That's literally the premise. I watched it in my boxers with my feet on the coffee table. The expensive coffee table that I was previously forbidden from putting my feet on because it was real wood and not a footstool. Turns out it made an excellent footstool. Toby became the king of the couch, which was another previously forbidden activity. Nora had always insisted that dogs belonged on the floor because furniture is for humans. But you know what? Toby had been more loyal to me in 5 years than most humans had been in my entire life. So if he wanted to sprawl across the sectional like a furry emperor, he'd earned that right. We watched Space Pirates together, and I swear he was following the plot better than I was. By week 2, I started noticing physical changes. I looked in the bathroom mirror one morning while brushing my teeth and realized I looked different, lighter somehow, less like a guy who was carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations and more like an actual human person with his own life. The bags under my eyes were smaller. My shoulders weren't permanently hunched like I was expecting an anvil to drop on my head at any moment. Even my neighbors noticed. Mrs. Henderson, the 70-something lady next door who spent most of her time gardening and occasionally asking me to help her move heavy pots, stopped me while I was getting my mail. "Leo," she said, squinting at me over her bifocals, "you look younger. What are you doing differently?" "Divorce lighting," I told her without missing a beat. "It's like ring light for your soul, but legal and way cheaper than Botox." She laughed so hard she nearly dropped her watering can. "Divorce lighting? Oh honey, I'm going to use that. That's wonderful." Then she got serious for a moment, putting her hand on my arm with that grandmotherly wisdom that comes from living through multiple decades of human nonsense. "You know, my second husband forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. I divorced him and married my third husband, who never forgot a single one until he died 20 years later. Sometimes you have to close one door to find the one that actually opens." "That's beautiful, Mrs. Henderson," I said, genuinely touched. "Also, your lawn looks like hell," she added. "When you're done with your emotional journey, maybe trim those hedges." See, this was the kind of honest communication I'd been missing. No manipulation, no guilt trips, just straight talk about hedge maintenance and life advice. I actually trimmed those hedges that afternoon, and it felt therapeutic. Every snip of the shears was like cutting away another expectation I'd been carrying. Snip, there goes the obligation to fund everyone's dreams. Snip, goodbye to being treated like furniture. Snip, farewell to birthday parties nobody attends. My coworker Rita had become my unofficial therapist during lunch breaks. We'd sit in the break room, and she'd listen to my daily updates like they were episodes of her favorite TV show. "Any word from the in-laws?" she'd ask, unwrapping her sandwich with the enthusiasm of someone settling in for quality entertainment. "Not a single text," I'd report. "It's been 12 days. I'm starting to think they've actually given up." "Don't count on it," Rita warned, pointing at me with a carrot stick. In my experience, silence from angry family members is like silence from a toddler. It either means they're planning something or they've already done something terrible and they're waiting for you to notice. She wasn't wrong to be suspicious, but honestly, I was enjoying the peace too much to care. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I joined a gym. Well, I bought a membership and went twice, which is basically joining a gym in spirit. I reorganized my entire closet and discovered clothes I'd forgotten I owned. I found a shirt from college that still fit, which felt like a personal victory against aging and metabolism. But here's the thing that surprised me most. I started journaling. Not because I suddenly became some kind of poet who needed to document his feelings in flowery language. but because my petty thoughts deserve to be archived for historical purposes. Future Leo needed to remember this moment, this feeling of liberation, so that if I ever considered going back to being a doormat, I could read these entries and slap some sense into myself. My first journal entry was simple. Day 1 of freedom. Ate an entire pizza by myself. Didn't share with anyone. Felt amazing. Toby got a slice. He's a good boy. Deep philosophical stuff, really. Thoreau would have been proud. By entry 15, I was getting more creative. Walked past a Vera Wang store today. Thought about going in and asking how much veils cost. Decided against it because I didn't want to waste their time. Also, I might have laughed maniacally in the middle of the store, and that seems like the kind of thing that gets you escorted out by security. Entry 23. Made chicken marsala tonight. It was actually pretty good. Watched 3 episodes of Space Pirates. Toby fell asleep on my lap. This is what happiness feels like. Note to self. Remember this when the guilt texts eventually start. My evenings developed a routine that was gloriously, beautifully boring. I'd come home from work, take Toby for a walk around the neighborhood, cook something reasonably healthy, and then spend the rest of the night doing whatever I wanted. Sometimes I'd read books I'd been meaning to get to for years. Sometimes I'd play video games that Nora always said were a waste of time, but were actually incredibly relaxing. Sometimes I'd just sit on the porch with a beer and watch the sunset like some kind of philosophical cowboy contemplating the meaning of life. The house felt different too. Without the constant tension of walking on eggshells around Nora's moods, the place actually felt like home instead of like a museum where I was a reluctant visitor who might break something expensive. I moved furniture around, slightly rebellious but deeply satisfying. I put that ugly vase Patricia had given us as a wedding gift in the back of a closet where it belonged. I hung up a poster of my favorite band that Nora had always vetoed because it didn't match the aesthetic. Screw the aesthetic. My house, my poster, my rules. My buddy Jake finally broke his silence in week 3 with a text that said, "Dude, are you alive?" Instagram says Nora is going through changes, which is divorced woman speak, for my husband finally grew a spine. I texted back, alive and thriving, living my best life. Currently eating ice cream directly from the container while wearing socks with sandals. Living dangerously. Jake, you absolute madman. Socks with sandals? What's next? Cargo shorts. Me. Don't tempt me. I'm feeling rebellious enough to bring back the cargo short. Jake, I'm proud of you, man. Seriously, you should have done this years ago. He wasn't wrong. I should have set boundaries years ago. Should have stood up for myself the first time I felt taken for granted. But better late than never, right? Better to be a 35-year-old man learning self-respect than a 50-year-old man still being treated like an ATM with feelings. The thing about silence, though, is that it can be deceptive. It can make you think the storm has passed when really it's just gathering strength. But for those 3 weeks, I didn't care about the potential storm. I was too busy enjoying the sunshine, eating pizza without judgment, and letting my dog sleep on furniture that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I wrote in my journal that night, Day 21 of freedom. Still no contact from the in-laws. Starting to think they're regrouping. Don't care. Made excellent tacos tonight. Toby agrees they were excellent. We're living our best life. If this is rock bottom is actually pretty comfortable. Little did I know, the silence was about to break. But for that moment, sitting on my couch with my dog and my tacos and my complete lack of family drama, I was the happiest I'd been in years. And no amount of impending chaos could take that away from me. 3 weeks into my newfound freedom, I received what might be the most unexpected invitation of my entire life. Mr. Russo, my bank manager, invited me to a company barbecue. Not as a customer, not as a business obligation, but as what he called an honorary guest and staff legend. The email arrived on a Friday afternoon while I was knee-deep in tax forms for a client who thought creative accounting meant basically committing fraud, but with personality. Subject line, you're invited. First National Bank Annual Summer Barbecue, featuring our favorite financial revolutionary. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from too much exposure to Excel spreadsheets. The email explained that my $1 veil transfer had become legendary among the bank staff. Apparently, word had spread from Mr. Russo to the tellers, from the tellers to the loan officers, and from the loan officers to pretty much everyone who worked at First National Bank. I'd become folklore. I was the guy who'd stood up to his demanding family with the world's most symbolic dollar, and somehow, that made me a hero in the banking world. The staff would love to meet you, Mr. Russo wrote. We've been calling you the dollar bill kid around the office. Janet from accounting made a cake. Please come. There will be burgers. I showed the email to Toby, who was lying on the couch in his usual spot, because yes, he still owned the furniture and I had no regrets about it. Buddy, I've been invited to a bank barbecue. A bank barbecue. People who handle money all day want to have hamburgers with me because I sent my sister-in-law $1. This is either the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me or the greatest thing. I can't decide which. Toby yawned, which I took as his blessing to attend. Saturday rolled around, and I found myself driving to Riverside Park where First National Bank was hosting their annual employee appreciation event. I debated what to wear to a bank barbecue. Business casual felt too formal, but showing up in cargo shorts felt like I was trying too hard to embrace my new rebellious lifestyle. I settled on jeans and a polo shirt, the universal uniform of, I'm trying but not that hard. The park was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. There were kids running around with face paint, a bouncy castle that seemed structurally questionable, and several grills smoking away with the promise of meat cooked by people who probably didn't grill very often but were enthusiastic about it. I spotted Mr. Russo near the main pavilion, flipping burgers with the concentration of a man performing surgery. Leo, he called out when he saw me, waving a spatula like it was a royal scepter. You made it. Everyone, this is him. This is the dollar bill kid. I'm not going to lie, being announced like I was some kind of celebrity at a bank barbecue was surreal. Several people actually applauded. A woman in her 30s wearing a First National Bank, Your Financial Future t-shirt came up and shook my hand enthusiastically. I'm Jennifer from the loan department. Your story has been circulating for weeks. You're basically a legend. I sent $1, I said, still processing the applause. That's a pretty low bar for legendary status. You don't understand, Jennifer said, her eyes sparkling with the kind of excitement usually reserved for celebrity sightings or really good sales. We deal with entitled people all day, every day. People who think rules don't apply to them. People who demand special treatment. People who try to use family emergencies as leverage for better interest rates. And then you came along and just drew a line in the sand. With $1. It was beautiful. Mr. Russo abandoned his grill duties to join us, handing the spatula to a younger guy who looked terrified to be in charge of the burgers. Leo, you have to understand something. In banking, we see a lot of financial abuse. We see people being taken advantage of by family members, significant others, business partners who are basically parasites. But we can't say anything because of privacy and professionalism. So when you did what you did, he grinned. It was cathartic. For all of us. Plus, added a guy named Marcus who worked as a teller, the note you included, by a veil. Make it symbolic, that was chef's kiss. He actually made the chef's kiss gesture, fingers to lips and everything. We've been using it around the office. Marcus, can you help me with this deposit? Sure, make it symbolic. I couldn't help but laugh. This was absurd. This was ridiculous. This was also the most validation I'd received from anyone in months, and it felt amazing. They'd actually prepared for my arrival. Jennifer led me to a table near the main pavilion where they'd set up what could only be described as a dollar bill kid shrine. There was a printout of a $1 bill with my face poorly photoshopped onto George Washington's body. Someone had made a banner that said, Financial Revenge Expert, in glitter letters. And there, hanging on a small clothing rack like it was merchandise at a concert, was an apron. A beautiful, ridiculous, perfect apron. It was forest green with white lettering that declared, Financial Revenge Expert, First National Bank honorary title. Below that, in smaller letters, specializing in symbolic transfers. We had it made custom, Mr. Russo said proudly, handing it to me. You're officially an honorary member of the First National Bank staff. This comes with exactly 0 benefits, but unlimited respect. I put on the apron, feeling like I'd just been knighted by the banking equivalent of royalty. This is the greatest thing I've ever received, I said honestly. Better than my wedding gifts. Better than my birthday presents. Better than. I stopped myself, remembering that nobody had actually given me birthday presents this year, but the point stood. Over burgers, which were slightly burnt but tasted like victory, I ended up telling my story to what felt like half the bank staff. They gathered around the picnic table like I was a campfire storyteller, hanging on every detail about the forgotten birthday, the $15,000 dress request, and the glorious moment I'd transferred exactly $1. "What I don't understand," said a woman named Patricia. Not my mother-in-law Patricia, thank God, but a nice Patricia who worked in customer service, "is how they thought they could just skip your birthday and then ask for that much money. The audacity alone is worth studying." "Right," I said, gesturing with my burger. "Like, the math doesn't math. Zero birthday acknowledgement plus $15,000 request does not equal a happy husband. Even I can do that equation, and I'm an accountant who once accidentally listed a client's dog as a dependent." The crowd erupted in laughter. Marcus nearly choked on his hot dog. "So what happened after you sent the dollar?" asked a younger guy named Tyler, who looked fresh out of college. "Did they call you? Email? Send a strongly worded letter?" "Oh, they showed up at my office," I said. My wife stormed in like a tornado in designer activewear. She demanded to know how I could embarrass her family. I told her I didn't embarrass anyone. I just finally stopped being embarrassed of myself. More applause. These people were way too invested in my personal drama, but honestly, I was here for it. Mr. Russo sat down next to me with his own burger and a beer. "So, Leo, serious question. What's next for you? You've frozen the accounts, changed the locks, sent the symbolic dollar. Where do you go from here?" I thought about it for a moment, watching kids play on the bouncy castle, listening to the sounds of a lazy Saturday afternoon. Honestly, I'm just focusing on peace right now. Peace and maybe throwing a birthday party where people actually show up. "You know what?" Mr. Russo said, raising his beer. "We should celebrate your birthday. Right here, right now. Unofficial redo birthday party." Before I could protest, someone was already bringing out a cake, the one Janet from accounting had apparently made. It was a simple sheet cake with white frosting and blue letters that said, "Happy belated birthday, legend." They'd even included a single candle in the shape of a $sign. The entire bank staff sang happy birthday to me in the middle of a public park, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I got a little choked up. Not because the singing was particularly good. Marcus was tone deaf and Tyler forgot half the words. But because these strangers, these people who knew me only as that guy who sent $1, cared more about my birthday than my actual family had. I blew out the $sign candle and made a wish. Not for revenge, not for justice. Not even for Nora to suddenly realize what she'd lost. I wish for more days like this. More moments where I felt valued, respected, and celebrated. More experiences where I was treated like a person instead of a bank account. "Speech," someone yelled, and others picked up the chant. "Speech, speech." I stood up, still wearing my financial revenge expert apron, and raised my beer. Okay. I just want to say that 3 weeks ago, I sat alone in a restaurant on my birthday with a cake nobody helped me eat. Today, I'm at a park with people who made me a cake and actually sang to me. The math is pretty clear on which situation is better. I paused for effect. Also, this burger is way better than the food at Salvatore's, and I didn't have to pay $237 for it. So that's a win. Everyone cheered. Mr. Russo clapped me on the back so hard I nearly dropped my beer. As the afternoon wore on and the sun started to set over Riverside Park, I found myself thinking about how weird life can be. A month ago, I was a guy who felt invisible, forgotten, taken for granted. Now I was wearing an apron declaring me a financial revenge expert and eating cake with bank employees who thought I was some kind of folk hero. "You know," Mr. Russo said as we watched the cleanup crew start packing up the grills, "in all my years in banking, I've never seen someone handle a difficult situation with such creativity. That dollar transfer was art, Leo. Financial art." "Thanks," I said, genuinely meaning it. You know what the best part is? I sleep better now. No more lying awake wondering why I'm not enough, why nobody remembers my birthday, why I'm always the last priority. I finally put myself first, and it turns out that's not selfish. It's survival. "Damn right," Mr. Russo agreed. "And hey, whenever you need banking services, you come to me. I'll personally make sure your accounts stay frozen until you're ready. Consider it my contribution to your peace of mind." We shook hands, and I felt like I'd made a genuine friend. Not someone who wanted something from me. Not someone who saw me as a resource to be exploited, but someone who respected me for standing up for myself. As I drove home that evening with my new apron on the passenger seat and leftover cake in the back, Toby greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm. "Buddy," I told him, "I went to a bank barbecue, and it was actually fun. They made me cake. They sang to me. They gave me an apron. This is what happens when you stop accepting scraps and start demanding respect." He wagged his tail in agreement. Or maybe he just wanted some of the leftover burger I'd saved for him. Either way, it felt like validation. That night, I wrote in my journal, Day 24 of freedom. Attended a bank barbecue. Became a folk hero for sending $1. Received best apron ever. Had actual birthday celebration with people who care. Life is weird but good. Very good. 2 months. 63 days, to be exact. Not that I was counting or anything, but I'm an accountant, so numbers just stick in my brain like gum on a sidewalk. 63 days since the family intervention, since I'd frozen the accounts, since I'd sent that beautiful, symbolic dollar. 63 days of living my best life like I was the star of some indie film about self-discovery, except with more takeout and fewer meaningful shots of me staring pensively at the ocean. Life had settled into a rhythm that I can only describe as aggressively peaceful. I'd redecorated the living room. Well, redecorated is generous. I'd basically just removed all of Nora's throw pillows and replaced them with exactly 0 throw pillows, because who actually needs decorative cushions that serve no functional purpose? I'd also bought a massive TV, the kind that Nora would have vetoed immediately because it was too big and ruins the aesthetic of the room. The aesthetic of my room was now guy who enjoys watching sports on a screen the size of a small car, and I was completely fine with that. Work was going well. I'd gotten a promotion to senior accountant, which came with a modest raise and slightly better health insurance. Rita had joked that my newfound confidence was probably why they'd promoted me. "You're walking around here like you own the place," she'd said. "It's working for you. Keep it up." I'd taken her advice and started speaking up more in meetings, offering opinions instead of just nodding along like a bobblehead with anxiety. Even my social life had improved. Jake and I had started a weekly poker night with some other guys from college. Nothing fancy, just beer, chips, and the kind of trash talk that makes you feel like you're 22 again instead of pushing 40. Last week, I'd won $73 and bragging rights for an entire month. It was the most fun I'd had in years that didn't involve passive-aggressively freezing bank accounts. Toby was thriving too. I'd started taking him to this dog park across town where he'd made friends with a golden retriever named Biscuit and a neurotic poodle named Chairman Meow. Yes, a dog named Chairman Meow, because the owner had a sense of humor. Watching Toby play with other dogs while I chatted with their owners about normal things like weather and the best brand of dog food felt like the most mundane, wonderful thing in the world. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody forgot my birthday. Nobody demanded $15,000 for designer dresses. I'd even started dating. Well, dating was a strong word. I'd gone on exactly 2 coffee dates with a woman named Michelle who worked at the library. Nothing serious, just casual conversations about books and life and how her ex-husband had tried to convince her that his gaming PC was a household necessity worth $3,000. We bonded over stories of financial audacity. It felt nice to talk to someone who understood that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, it was necessary. So when my phone rang on a random Tuesday evening in late September and Nora's name popped up on the screen, I stared at it like it was a bomb that might explode if I answered. I was in the middle of making spaghetti, from scratch, because I'd become that person who watches cooking videos on YouTube and thinks I can do that. And Toby was sitting nearby, hoping I'd drop some ground beef. Should I answer it? I asked Toby, holding my phone like it might bite me. He tilted his head, considering the question with all the wisdom of a 5-year-old dog who once ate an entire stick of butter and lived to tell the tale. The phone kept ringing. Against my better judgment, or maybe because I was curious about what disaster had finally prompted her to break 2 months of silence, I answered. Leo, Nora's voice came through, and it was different. Softer, less demanding, almost hesitant, which was not a tone I'd ever associated with my soon-to-be ex-wife. Hi. Thanks for answering. Nora, I replied, putting down my wooden spoon and turning off the stove because this conversation felt like it required my full attention. This is unexpected. I figured you'd communicate exclusively through lawyers at this point. Yeah, well, she said, and I could hear her taking a breath like she was preparing for something difficult. I needed to call you directly. Something happened. My first thought was that someone had died, because that's usually what something happened means when estranged family members call you. My second thought was that they'd somehow found a way to access the frozen accounts, which would be impressive but also illegal. My third thought was interrupted by Nora actually speaking. Clara postponed the wedding, she said quietly. I processed this information for approximately 3 seconds before responding. Was it the dress? I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Let me guess, Vera Wong doesn't accept installment plans. Or maybe they require actual money instead of hopes and dreams. There was silence on the other end, the kind of silence that happens when someone realizes you're not going to be sympathetic to their problems. Then, unexpectedly, Nora laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a sarcastic laugh, but an actual genuine laugh that sounded like the woman I'd married 8 years ago before everything went sideways. Okay, I deserved that, she admitted. But no, it wasn't the dress. It was Brett. Let me guess, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter. His cryptocurrency empire turned out to be a house of cards built on wishful thinking and Reddit threads. Something like that, Nora said. Turns out he's been lying about a lot of things. His job, his finances, his parents' rough patch, that somehow included Bahamas vacations. Clara found out he'd been using her credit cards to fund his investments. Yikes, I said, and I actually meant it. Whatever issues I had with Clara and her wedding demands, nobody deserved to be financially manipulated by their partner. I knew that feeling all too well. That's rough. I'm sorry she's going through that. Are you though? Nora asked, but not in an accusatory way. More like she was genuinely curious. Yeah, actually, I replied honestly. Look, Clara asking me for 15 grand was ridiculous, but Brett lying to her and stealing from her? That's a whole different level of wrong. Nobody deserves that. More silence. I could hear background noise on her end. Maybe traffic. Maybe just the sound of her processing emotions. When she spoke again, her voice was even softer. We might have overreacted, she said carefully. About the whole money thing. The dollar. The frozen accounts. All of it. I had to sit down for this. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat, staring at the half-cooked spaghetti on the stove. Might have overreacted? I repeated slowly. Nora, you literally tried to have me declared mentally unfit so you could access bank accounts to fund a wedding dress that cost more than most people's cars. I know, she said, and she actually sounded apologetic. I know, and you were right to cut us off. I can see that now. After watching what Brett did to Clara, after seeing how she trusted him and he just used her, I guess I understand why you did what you did. You guess? I said, feeling that familiar frustration bubbling up. Nora, I sat alone in a restaurant on my birthday. Alone. With a cake that nobody ate and calls that nobody answered. And 3 days later, you asked me for $15,000 like I was a mobile banking app. This wasn't me overreacting. This was me finally reacting appropriately. You were always the funny one, she said suddenly, and there was something in her voice, nostalgia maybe, or regret, or some emotion I couldn't quite identify over the phone. That comment hit me wrong. Not angry wrong, but tired wrong. The kind of wrong that comes from years of being misunderstood. No, Nora, I said firmly. I was always the funding one. There's a difference. I heard her inhale sharply, like I'd slapped her through the phone. Good. Maybe she needed to hear it that bluntly. I wasn't calling to ask for anything, she said after a moment. I just thought you should know about Clara. And that I, might have been unfair to you. Might have been, I repeated again. That's doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Fine. Was unfair. Definitely was unfair. Is that what you want to hear? What I wanted to hear was happy birthday 2 months ago, I said. What I wanted was for my wife to show up to a party I planned. What I wanted was to be treated like I mattered for reasons other than my bank account balance. But we don't always get what we want, do we? Nora was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I'm sorry I forgot your birthday, Leo. I'm sorry I took you for granted. I'm sorry about a lot of things. Yeah, well, I said, standing up and walking to the window. Outside, Mrs. Henderson was watering her garden again. Life just kept going, regardless of phone calls and apologies. Sorry doesn't unfreeze bank accounts. Sorry doesn't unfuck 8 years of feeling invisible. Sorry is just a word people say when they finally realize they pushed someone too far. So that's it, she asked. We're just done? 8 years of marriage, and we're just over. I thought about that question. I thought about the lonely birthday, the symbolic dollar, the bank barbecue where strangers celebrated me more than my own family ever had. I thought about Michelle the librarian and poker nights with Jake and Toby sleeping on furniture he wasn't supposed to be on. I thought about the person I'd become in the last 2 months. Someone who actually liked himself, someone who didn't apologize for having boundaries. Yeah, I said finally. I think we are. Not because I'm angry anymore, but because I'm finally happy. And I'm not giving that up to go back to being someone's ATM. I understand, Nora said quietly. For what it's worth, I hope you stay happy. Thanks, I said, meaning it. And I hope Clara figures things out. Tell her that if she needs help finding a good lawyer to go after Brett, I know a few. Nobody deserves to be used like that. Leo, Nora said before I could hang up. Yeah. The dollar thing. The veil. It was actually kind of brilliant. In a petty, devastating way. I smiled despite myself. Yeah, it was. Take care of yourself, Nora. I hung up before she could respond, placed my phone on the counter, and went back to making spaghetti. Toby looked at me expectantly, probably wondering if the drama was affecting his dinner schedule. It's over, buddy, I told him, stirring the sauce. Really, actually over. And you know what? It feels good. He barked once, which I chose to interpret as agreement. That night, I wrote in my journal, Day 63 of freedom. Nora called. Clara's wedding is off. Brett turned out to be exactly the disaster I predicted. Nora almost apologized. I hung up feeling lighter. Made excellent spaghetti. Life is good. Really good. 1 year. 365 days since the birthday party that nobody attended. Since the symbolic dollar that became legend. Since I discovered that freezing bank accounts was way more satisfying than couples therapy. October 25th rolled around again, and this time, I was determined to do things differently. No grand gestures, no fancy restaurants, no expectations that would inevitably lead to disappointment. Just a simple backyard barbecue with people who actually gave a damn about my existence. I'd spent the morning preparing my backyard like I was hosting a casual cooking show called Middle-Aged Men Who've Discovered Self-Respect. I'd bought a new grill. Nothing fancy, just a solid Weber that could handle burgers and steaks without making me feel like I was compensating for anything. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, and with it came a sense of closure that no amount of therapy could have provided. Nora got the fancy coffee maker and half the throw pillows. I got the house, my sanity, and full control of my finances. Best trade deal in history. The guest list was small but mighty. Jake and his girlfriend Amanda, Rita from work and her husband Tom, Mr. Russo from the bank who'd become an actual friend instead of just a professional contact, Michelle the librarian who'd graduated from coffee dates to actual girlfriend status, and Mrs. Henderson from next door who'd promised to bring her famous potato salad and unsolicited life advice. Oh, and Toby, obviously. He was the guest of honor as far as I was concerned. He'd never once forgotten my birthday or asked me for $15,000. By 3 p.m., my backyard looked like an actual party venue instead of a sad monument to loneliness. I'd strung up some lights, the kind you see on Pinterest that Nora would have approved of, except I'd done it for myself this time, not for Instagram aesthetic points. There was a cooler full of beer, a table with chips and dip, and a playlist of classic rock that would have driven Nora insane because it's too loud and not sophisticated enough for entertaining. Jake arrived first, carrying a case of beer and wearing a shirt that said, "I'm here for the emotionally stable friend." He grinned when he saw me. Dude, you've really embraced the divorced dad aesthetic. The grill, the lights, the cargo shorts. You're living the dream. I'm wearing cargo shorts ironically. I protested, even though I was 100% wearing them unironically. They were comfortable and had excellent pocket space. And yes, I am living the dream. The dream where people actually show up to my birthday party. Speaking of which, Amanda said, handing me a wrapped present, "Happy birthday, Leo. We got you something ridiculous because Jake said you'd appreciate the humor." I unwrapped it to find a custom t-shirt that said, "Financial Revenge Expert, EST 2024, with a small dollar bill printed underneath. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. This is perfect. I'm wearing this to the bank next time I see Mr. Russo. Rita arrived next with Tom. carrying what appeared to be an entire cake from an actual bakery. "We couldn't let you have another birthday without proper cake," she announced. "This one says, 'Happy Birthday, Legend,' because apparently that's your brand now." "It's my brand, and I'm owning it," I said, accepting the cake. "Thank you. This is already better than last year, and we haven't even started grilling yet." Mr. Russo showed up wearing my financial revenge expert apron from the bank barbecue, claiming he'd had it dry cleaned specifically for this occasion. "I figured if anyone earned the right to wear this today, it's you. But I'm borrowing it for grill duties if you don't mind." "It's all yours," I said. "You've earned honorary apron privileges." Michelle arrived with a bottle of wine and a book she'd picked out specifically for me. Something about a guy who goes on a journey of self-discovery after his life falls apart. "I thought you'd appreciate the parallels," she said, kissing my cheek. "Plus, it's funny and you like funny." "I do like funny," I agreed, pulling her into a hug. "Thank you for being here. For being you. For not asking me to fund anyone's wedding dress purchases." She laughed. "Leo, I work at a library. My idea of a major expense is splurging on hardcover books instead of waiting for the paperback. You're safe with me." Mrs. Henderson was the last to arrive, carrying her legendary potato salad and wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'm with Stupid," with an arrow pointing to her left, even though nobody was standing there. "I made extra," she announced, "because Leo finally has friends who show up, and that deserves extra potato salad." By 4 p.m., my backyard was filled with people who actually wanted to be there. No obligations, no guilt trips, no family members who saw me as a mobile banking service. Just genuine humans who liked me for reasons that had nothing to do with my checking account balance. Jake manned the grill with Mr. Russo, the two of them arguing good-naturedly about the proper temperature for cooking steak, while drinking beer and occasionally flipping burgers. Rita and Amanda were deep in conversation about reality TV shows I'd never heard of. Tom was teaching Toby tricks in exchange for treats, even though Toby already knew all the tricks and was basically scamming him for extra snacks. Mrs. Henderson was holding court near the potato salad, telling Michelle stories about her 3 marriages with the kind of wisdom that only comes from living through multiple decades of relationship drama. I stood there for a moment, beer in hand, just taking it all in. The laughter, the conversation, the smell of grilling meat, the complete absence of family members demanding money for absurd purchases. This was what a birthday party should feel like. This was what life should feel like. "Hey Leo," Jake called out. "Come settle this debate. Should steaks be medium rare, or is Mr. Russo a heathen who wants them well done?" "Medium rare is the only acceptable answer," I called back, walking over to join them. "Anything else is a crime against beef." "Thank you," Jake said, vindicated. "Mr. Russo here wants to murder these beautiful ribeyes." "I like my food cooked," Mr. Russo protested. "Sue me." We argued about steak temperatures like it mattered, like it was the most important debate in the world, and it felt amazing. These were the kinds of stupid, meaningless, perfect conversations that made life worth living. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. We ate too much, drank slightly too much, and laughed way too much. Rita told stories about office drama that made everyone cry laugh. Jake reminisced about college with stories I'd forgotten, including one about me drunkenly trying to explain tax law to a houseplant at 3 a.m. Michelle shared library stories about patrons who returned books with the strangest items used as bookmarks. Highlights included a piece of bacon, a parking ticket, and inexplicably, someone's tax return. Speaking of tax returns, Tom said, refilling his beer, "I heard through the grapevine that your ex-wife's sister ended up calling off her wedding." "That true?" The table went quiet, everyone looking at me with curiosity. Even Toby stopped begging for scraps to pay attention. I took a sip of my beer, smiled, and raised my glass. She wanted $15,000 for a dress. I gave her $1 for closure. The table erupted. Jake spit out his beer. Rita cackled so loud that Mrs. Henderson's dog, 3 houses down, started barking. Mr. Russo actually stood up and slow clapped. Michelle was laughing so hard she was crying, and even Tom, who barely knew the full story, was doubled over. $1. Rita wheezed. "I will never get over the $1. That's the most savage thing I've ever heard." "It was symbolic," I said, still grinning. "Very trendy. I read about it on the internet." "You're a legend," Jake said, raising his own beer. "An actual legend. That shirt we got you isn't a joke. It's a documentary. Mrs. Henderson raised her wine glass. In my day, we called that having a backbone. Good for you, Leo. My second husband forgot my birthday for 3 years, and when I left him, all I gave him was divorce papers and his collection of ugly ties. Your dollar was more creative. We toasted to symbolic gestures, to boundaries, to birthday parties where people actually showed up. We toasted to new beginnings and closed chapters. We toasted to everything and nothing, because that's what you do when you're surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. As the sun set and the string lights came on, casting a warm glow over my backyard, I looked around at this mismatched group of humans who'd chosen to spend their Saturday evening celebrating me. Not because they had to, not because they felt obligated, but because they wanted to. That realization hit me harder than any divorce papers ever could. You good? Michelle asked softly, putting her hand on my arm. Yeah, I said, meaning it completely. I'm really, really good. Later, after everyone had gone home, after the leftovers were packed away, the grill was cleaned, and Toby had passed out in a food coma on the couch, I sat on my back porch with a final beer and reflected on the past year. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic confrontations or public callouts or elaborate schemes. Sometimes revenge is quiet, clean, and paid in exact change, or in my case, $1 exact. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well, surrounding yourself with people who value you, and learning to value yourself enough to walk away from people who don't. I'd learned something important over the past year. You can't buy loyalty. You can't purchase genuine affection or real friendship or actual love. But you can definitely freeze the accounts of people who mistake you for an ATM. You can definitely change the locks on people who take you for granted. And you can definitely send one symbolic dollar to make a point that resonates louder than any argument ever could. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Best birthday party ever. Same time next year. I typed back, absolutely. But you're bringing the potato salad. Mrs. Henderson has retired from potato salad duty. I looked at Toby through the window, snoring on his forbidden couch cushion, living his best life. I thought about the party last year, the lonely table, the uneaten cake, the silence that echoed louder than any noise. I thought about the person I'd been then, desperate for validation, willing to be invisible, treating himself like he didn't matter. And then I thought about the person I was now, confident enough to wear cargo shorts unironically, brave enough to send $1 instead of 15,000, happy enough to throw a party that people actually attended. I raised my beer to the empty backyard, to the memory of that terrible birthday, to the symbolic dollar that changed everything. Happy birthday to me, I said out loud. The legend who learned that self-respect costs exactly $1. And somewhere in the universe, I like to think that dollar was still making people laugh.